Hello everyone, and welcome to my presentation on the aspect of verbs or verb aspect. The aspect of verbs is very similar to verb tense, which is the present, past, future, right? So tense indicates when the action is expressed by the verb. On the other hand, verb aspect refers to the timing of the verb and addresses whether the action occurred in a single block of time, continuously or repetitively. The difference with the verbal aspect is that the verbal aspect allows us to expand all possible ways of expressing something in time. So all verbs have both tense and aspect. Verbal aspect consists of the simple progressive, perfect, and perfect progressive. Now let's begin. The simple aspect. The simple aspect is used to express a single action, a repeated action, or a permanent state. Now the first is the past simple aspect, wherein an action that ended in the past occurs. And here we have the example, he painted yesterday. The present simple aspect now is when an action that is habitual or repeated occurs. So the example here, she paints every weekend. She paints every weekend. Moving on to the future simple aspect, where a plan is made for an action to happen in the future. The example reads, she will paint tomorrow. Let's look at the progressive aspect. The progressive or continuous aspect is used to talk about continuous events. Now the past progressive aspect is when an action that was happening indicates when another action finished. I was painting when I saw the accident. The present progressive aspect is when an action is in the process of happening now. She is painting now. The future progressive aspect is when an action will happen in the future for a length of time. They will be painting when you arrive tomorrow. Now the perfect aspect. It is used to discuss completed actions. It is often formed by the verb have combined with a past tense verb. Now let's look at the past perfect aspect, where an action that finished before another action or time in the past occurs. So the example reads, we had painted the house before the rain started. We had painted the house before the rain started. Now let's move on to the present perfect aspect, where an action that happened at an unsaid time in the past occurs. She has painted many portraits. Moving on to the future perfect tense, when an action that will finish before another action or time in the future occurs. The example reads, he will have painted the bedroom before his daughter comes home. So there are key formulas that we can look at in these sentences. So for the past perfect aspect, it is had painted, which is indicating the past perfect. In the present perfect, it is has painted, and in the future perfect, will have been painted. Okay, let's move on to the perfect progressive. The past perfect progressive is when an action that happened over time in the past before another action occurs. So the sentence reads, she had been painting for a while when she started classes. So there are two different things occurring in this sentence. She had been painting, and then it mentions how she started classes, right? And this indicates past perfect progressive. Now the present perfect progressive is when an action that happens over time, starting in the past and continuing in the present, occurs. So the sentence, for example, reads, I have been painting landscapes since I started school. So now the sentence here, there are two different things happening, right? I have been painting, she was painting landscapes, and then she mentioned starting school again. So there are two different things. And let's look at the past, the difference between the past and the present now. The past, the formula there is she had been painting, and in the present it is I have been painting. So you see the change of tense there. Now lastly, let's look at the future perfect progressive, when an action that happens over time in the future before another action occurs. Now the sentence I have provided here is, we will have been painting for several hours before we can see how it looks. We will have been painting for several hours before we can see how it looks. Now the formula here in this sentence is will have been painting, which indicates clearly the future tense. And because it mentions this before another action, which is how we can see how it looks, it is therefore indicating a future perfect progressive tense. I'd like to thank you all for listening. I hope you picked up or learned something new. Thanks again.